Hello guys, it is Saturday. I think we are in 2022, September 3, September 3, and it is Saturday uh, morning, just like 11 o'clock. So let me just explore today a little bit about an overview about Linux. Linux is a the Linux platform is a huge topic. But I'll explain a little bit about an overview. What is a Linux generally? Linux is an open source operating system. An operating system is the software that directly manages a system's hardware and resources like CPU, memory, and storage. The OS sits between applications and hardware and makes the connections between all of your software and the physical resources that do the work. So this is a general description about Linux, but keep in mind Linux platform is a powerful operating system and it has a lot of capabilities, and we will not cover on this topic because it's just general. It is something general that you can find even in Google. So, how it works? It's also a question, think about an operating system like a car engine. An engine can run on its own, but it becomes a functional car when it is connected with the transmission, axles, and wheels. Without the engine running properly, the rest of the car won't work. If the, I mean, without the engine running properly, then if the engine is not running properly, then the rest of the car won't work. So, so Linux was designed to be similar to Unix. Unix is also an operating system. It is a multitasking operating system, very powerful. Uh, I have only a few experience in Unix, but Linux basically was designed to be similar to Unix, but has evolved to run on a wide variety of hardware from Vonis to supercomputers. And keep in mind that Linux runs on every device, just smartphones, computers, laptops, desktops, and even supercomputers. Every Linux based operating system involves the Linux kernel. So there's a strong bond between. If you heard the word Linux, just think about the word kernel, because Linux is a kernel-based. Uh, it's a kernel-based. So the reason that I'm saying is that every Linux usually based on the Linux on involves, not base, involves in a Linux kernel which manages hardware resources and a set of software packages that make up the rest of the operating system. So that's I think a fair definition. Every Linux based operating system involves the Linux kernel which manages hardware resources and a set of software packages that make up the rest of the operating system. Those include some common core components like the GNU tools, I think you are aware of. Among others, these tools give the user a way to manage resources provided by the kernel, install additional software, configure performance, security settings, and more. All these tools bundled together make up the functional operating system, because Linux is an open source, and of course you can find easily with its uh, background code, so that you can modify according to your needs. Because of Linux is an open source operating system, combination of software can vary between Linux distributions. So that's why always we have so many distribution in Linux. For example, you have Ubuntu, you have also Ubuntu Linux OS, CentOS operating system, which is also Linux. But all of them share, all of them are based, kernel based, involve kernel. And also you have the most and the most powerful, which is Red Hat. Usually, most of the Linux distributions, not originate, have a strong connection with Red Hat. Red Hat is a strong, very strong and powerful operating system. It's also Linux based. And also you have Oracle. Oracle also have its own version of Linux, Oracle Linux, and which is very easy to install the software. And you have also Fedora, Debian, Kali, Linux Mint, Arch Linux. You have a lot of distribution on Linux. That is why each interest group is developing a specific Linux distribution. So Linux is all these distributions have a common themes, which is I think a command line or shell or terminal, Linux shell, or whatever you call. This is a very powerful tool. And Linux without command line, it's not worth operating system. Believe me, because in Linux, the the, the the strongest tool that you use to install to do administrative tasks is the shell command or terminal or command line. So the command line is your direct access to a computer. It's where you ask software to perform hardware actions that point and click graphical user interfaces. Simply can't ask. Command lines are available on many operating systems, proprietary or open source. It's normal. Even Windows has a command line, but it's usually associated with Linux because of both command lines and open source software together give users unrestricted access to their computer. The latest release of Red Hat Linux also comes with even more built-in command line capabilities than ever before, and includes consoles that bundle those capabilities in easy-to-use modules that exist off on of the command line. So you see, even the latest release of Red Hat, very powerful operating system, comes with a command line. So in Linux, command line is very, very important. What does Linux include? Linux include kernel, the base component of the OS. Kernel is the base component of the OS of Linux OS. Without it, the OS doesn't work. The kernel manages the system's resources communicates with the hardware. It is responsible for memory, process, and file management. System uses base the administrative layer for system level tasks like configuration, software install. This includes the shell and command line daemons, process daemons in Linux. I think you're aware of it. If you have never had, just go and find on in the internet what this means. So and also Linux include applications, a type of software that lets you perform a task. Apps include everything from desktop tools and programming languages to multi-user business suites. Most Linux, most Linux distributions offer a central database to search for and download additional apps. Also, Linux include system user space, as we said. Linux and open source. Okay, Linux is a free open source operating system released under a GNU General Public License, GPL. Everyone can run, study, modify, and redistribute the source code. So the benefit is that you can also reproduce the source code of the entire operating system. Linux became the largest open source software project in the world. Professional and hobbyist programmers, just like me, even if you're not professional, but your hobby is to play with computers, just you can get benefit from Linux. It's free and open source. It doesn't cost you too much. Okay. So many people choose, I think, Red Hat. The reason why Red Hat is, as I said, is a powerful operating system and it's the foundation of Linux. Linux is the foundation for the modern IT stack, and Red Hat is one of the leading contributions to the Linux kernel and associated technologies in open source communities. Red Hat engineers help improve features, reliability, security to make sure your infrastructure performs and remains stable no matter you use case and workload. Red Hat Enterprise Linux provides a standard operating environment for everything your enterprise does in every environment, powering the apps that run your business across bare metal, virtual, virtual, containerized, private, and public clouds. Plus, customers running Red Hat Enterprise Linux gain economic advantage of more than I think 1 trillion each year just because of the OS. So, uh, by the way, in Red Hat Linux Enterprise is usually is best solution for